Today we are going to talk about a horror thriller called Smile from 2022. Enjoy your viewing. One day, a woman lies dead on her bed from an overdose when her daughter, Rose Cotter, stands still and stares at the lifeless body. In the present, a phone call awakens Rose from her dream. She is now a grown-up working as a psychiatrist in a psychiatric hospital. Later, she attends a session with one of her patients, Carl Renken. The patient continuously mutters that everyone, including himself, is going to die. Rose sits beside her patient, comforting him that even if what he's experiencing feels real, it can't hurt him. Following their session, Rose heads the front desk to request to put Carl under observation for a few days. The receptionist takes note of this and notifies Rose that her supervisor, Dr. Desai, wants to speak with her. When Rose enters her supervisor's office, Desai informs her that a patient she sent over to residency doesn't have insurance. Rose points out that their responsibility is to treat individuals in need. This reasoning isn't questioned by her superior. However, he does remind her to approach him first next time. A few moments later, just as Rose leaves her office to go home, her telephone suddenly rings, prompting her to walk back to her room and answer the call. Before meeting her new patient named Laura Weaver, a nurse orients Rose that the patient is the lone witness to her professor's self-murder. Upon entering the room, Rose finds a distraught Laura in the corner. The psychiatrist introduces herself and promises the patient that she's in a safe space. However, Laura counters that there's no place safe for her. Rose turns on her audio recorder and calmly asks Laura to sit, and the girl complies. When the psychiatrist begins examining Laura, the patient explains that she sees an entity wearing people's faces like a mask, either posing as someone she knows or as a stranger. She can only recognize the entity by its unpleasant smile, the worst she has ever seen. After the girl's confession, the psychiatrist thinks it's a hallucination. She tries to reassure her patient that people's minds are altered whenever they experience intense trauma. These comments cause Laura to shift her gaze away from her therapist, grumbling that no one listens to her. Rose convinces Laura to look back, but the girl fearfully falls from her seat and starts screaming that the entity is now with them. Concerned about her patient, Rose rapidly calls for assistance. Shortly after, Rose glances back and sees the shattered vase, but Laura is no longer on the floor. The patient is now standing in front of her, wickedly smiling while holding a shard of the broken vase. Then, Laura starts slitting her face down to her throat with the shard, leaving the therapist appalled. When the hospital staff arrives, the girl lies dead, drenched in her own blood, still smiling. Moments later, Rose is questioned by two detectives, one of whom is her ex-boyfriend, Joel. She states that Laura was having paranoid delusions that some sort of evil entity was haunting her. Once Rose gets back home, she notices a bloodstain on her shirt and instantly takes a shower. Later that night, she drinks a glass of wine and sees a figure resembling a smiling Laura in a dark area of her house. She gets startled when her fiancé, Trevor, unexpectedly returns home, causing the wine glass she's holding to slip and break. When Trevor turns on the light, Rose redirects her gaze to the place where she saw Laura's figure, but she sees no one. She then talks about what happened to her patient that day. For this reason, Trevor suggests canceling their arranged dinner with Rose's sister, Holly, to which Rose objects. During their dinner, Rose's mind is still preoccupied with the tragic incident. Holly then asks her sister if she'll be attending her son Jackson's birthday party, but Rose reasons that she can't since she has work on Saturday. This causes Holly to rage against Rose's job, considering the hospital she works at is gross. Holly's husband, Greg, adds that being a doctor there won't make her rich. However, Trevor answers the couple by saying how much his fiancée loves her job and that she's prepared to do it for free. Back at home, Trevor locks the door and asks his partner if she's okay. She replies that she is, then goes on to feed their cat, Mustache. The next day at the hospital, Rose asks the front desk for the case report involving Laura. Unexpectedly, Joel shows up to check how she is. Rose acknowledges his gestures before quickly ending their conversation by excusing herself that she has work to do. Inside her office, while reading the case of Laura's professor named Gabriel Munoz, Rose discovers that the man was also smiling when he killed himself. She then receives a call from Holly, apologizing to her and proposing to at least buy Jackson a present. While Holly talks on the phone, Rose looks out the window and spots someone who looks like Laura, standing in front of the hospital. Later, Rose walks past Carl sitting on his bed, smiling creepily. She walks back to speak with him, but to her surprise, the man suddenly chants that she's going to die. Out of fear, the psychiatrist shouts for the staff to restrain the patient, but when she glances back at Carl, the man appears to be laying on his bed the entire time. Moments later, Desai expresses concern about Rose's state following her encounter with Laura. He then gives her a 1-week break from work to focus on her own health. Afterward, Rose heads home and gets stuck in traffic, so she decides to buy a present for her nephew. At home, she starts wrapping the gift, and Trevor texts her that he'll be late for work. She then fills another glass of wine when their house suddenly alarms. Scared, she arms herself with scissors as she walks to the front door, only to find that the door is still locked. Just as she's ready to go back to the table, she notices their back door open. Suddenly, the telephone rings, startling her. When she answers the call, a woman from home security notifies her that a door alarm has been detected. The scared doctor informs the caller that her back door is open, and the woman questions whether Rose is certain she's alone. Then, the woman on the other end ominously advises Rose to look behind her. As Rose gently turns her head, the phone rings again, denoting that she wasn't holding it the entire time. She picks up the phone again, to which the actual safety operator speaks, asking the same question. Afterward, the authorities investigate the house, but discover nothing. They reassure the owner that false alarms frequently happen. Then Trevor comes home exactly as the police leave. He asks what happened, but his fiancée is unable to provide a clear explanation. However, she assures him that she's fine and continues to look for Mustache, who is nowhere to be found. Later that night, Rose dreams again of her dead mother, suddenly awakening from death. Awakened by her dream, the doctor spends the rest of the night listening to the recording of her conversation with Laura. While intently listening, she hears someone from the record. She replays the sound several times until Laura's figure appears beside her, causing Rose to fall. Frightened, she grabs a knife, but the figure has vanished. Trevor abruptly comes out, terrified of his fiancée's current state. The following morning, Rose meets her psychiatrist Madeline to express her fear and guilt over her experience the previous days. Her psychiatrist believes the reason for this is tied to her mother's self-murder. She claims that the young woman's experience with her patient awakened her old anxieties. To distract herself from anxiety, as Madeline advised, Rose attends Jackson's birthday celebration. Holly is surprised to see her sister, and she introduces her to her friends. After several hours, the birthday celebrant opens his aunt's present. Everyone is in disarray when he unwraps Mustache's dead body inside the box. Rose tries to dissuade everyone from thinking she killed her cat until she sees a person smiling at her. No one else appears to notice what she sees, and in a fit of insane terror, Rose fearfully falls when she sees the smiling woman in front of her. Soon after, she's rushed to the hospital for the wounds she got. Desai pays her a visit, but Rose's attention is immediately drawn to Holly, who seems to be arguing with Trevor outside the room. That night, the couple arrive home. But before leaving the car, Rose confides to Trevor that she may be experiencing what her patient Laura went through. She adds that the entity that killed her patient could possibly be the same one that's been haunting her. However, her partner believes nothing from what she said and exits the car. Rose follows him outside, compelling him to trust her. Later that evening, Trevor stays on the couch rather than sleeping with his fiancée. Then Rose searches for Gabriel Munoz on the internet until she hears a voice calling her from the darker side of the door. She shrugs it off and goes to sleep. Then a figure of her mother appears at her door, asking for her help. The next morning, Rose nearly gets hit by a car on her way to Munoz's residence. Mrs. Munoz opens the door and tells her stories about her husband's paranoia prior to his death. When Rose inquires whether Gabriel described what he saw, the widow takes her to a room where her husband sketched smiling faces. The widow continues by saying that her spouse started to change after witnessing a woman killing herself during a conference. Immediately, Rose blurts out questions and claims that Mr. Munoz was not insane, and the things he experienced are real because it's happening to her as well. This makes the widow uneasy and suspects Rose to be a morbid fanatic, driving her out of the house. Then, the anxious woman goes to Joel's apartment and asks him a favor to look for cases involving Gabriel Munoz. Joel initially hesitates but proceeds to browse reports and discovers an incident in which the man provided a statement on the self-murder of a woman named Angela Powell. Rose then requests that he run the same search on the woman. Coincidentally, they find out that Mrs. Powell also witnessed another self-murder case. Later that day, Rose returns home, eager to show her partner the printed proof that she isn't insane. Unfortunately, her excitement fades after seeing that Trevor invited Madeline to check on her. The furious woman storms out and slams the door. Then she goes to her sister's house, but Greg answers the door and objects to the idea of the siblings talking. Holly comes out and consents to speak with her. The eager woman tries to show printed images of other victims to her sister, while explaining how she got her patient's curse. However, Holly asserts that curses aren't real, and recounts what happened to their mom might happen to her sister. Rose argues that her sister was never there amidst their mother's mental instability and demise. Soon after, Rose apologizes to her sister, but Holly abruptly closes the door, remarking on how she traumatized Jackson. Feeling remorseful, Rose goes back to her car and calms herself. Surprisingly, Holly gets out of her house and taps on the car window. When Rose looks outside, her sister's smiling head drops upside down, frightening her. Meanwhile, Jackson observes his aunt screaming for no apparent reason. Later that night, Rose eats inside her car when Joel calls to inform her that he went through every file report. The man uncovers that there are 20 cases involving 19 self-murder victims, all of which follow a similar pattern. Rose wonders what happened to the one case of that didn't involve self-murder. to which Joel reveals that an accountant named Robert Talley broke the pattern by murdering another woman. Learning about this survivor, Rose decides to speak with him. As they travel to where Talley is detained, Rose asks Joel how long it took between each victim's deaths. The man reveals that none of them have lasted more than a week, but reassures his friend that it won't happen to her. Arriving at the prison, the psychiatrist approaches Mr. Talley by pretending to have a patient experiencing the same case he had. Before the man answers, he requests to get Joel removed from the room. When Joel leaves, Talley explains that Rose's patient must kill and ensure that someone witnesses the act in order to pass down the curse to another person. After hearing this, Rose bursts that she cannot kill anybody. Terrified that she may give the curse back to him, Talley fearfully shouts for the psychiatrist to leave. Back at her house, Rose receives a call from Madeline, which she ignores. Moments later, the worried woman receives a text from her fiancé, wanting to talk. She anxiously bites her nails until she accidentally hurts herself. She then washes her wound and reaches out for a knife until Madeline arrives. When Rose answers the door, Madeline states her responsibility to make sure that her patient isn't a danger to herself or others. Afterward, they head inside, and Madeline examines her patient. In the middle of their session, the telephone rings. Once Rose picks up the phone, Madeline is on the other line apologizing for what happened yesterday. Stunned, she stares at the Madeline inside her house, who eerily smiles and threatens her that her time is nearing its end. Rose fearfully backs away, but the entity follows, covers the scared woman's mouth, and shrieks in front of her face. Later at the hospital, Rose takes a knife in her car and conceals it inside her jacket. Upon entering the hospital, she visits Carl, who screams in terror after seeing her. Desai then walks inside the room, curious as to what Rose is doing inside. Instead of responding, the woman pulls out her knife and stabs Carl repeatedly, who still creepily smiles at her. To ensure that Desai is watching, Rose looks back at him and is terrified seeing the doctor screaming while tearing off his face. Suddenly, Rose wakes up from her dream and screams in her car. She jolts when Desai knocks on her window, asking about what she's doing in the parking lot. Then, Desai spots the knife inside her car, so he says that she shouldn't be alone. An idea comes to Rose's mind, and she drives away. As she drives to her old house, Joel calls to warn her that the cops are looking for her. In her old home, the woman recalls her failure to help her mother when she needed her aid. Then, the woman shuts the doors and curtains to ensure no one sees her. During the night, Rose hears a creaking door and discovers her mother's door half open. When she enters, she finds her mother crying in bed. Her mom begs for forgiveness and questions why she didn't help her, prompting the daughter to admit that she feared her mom when she was younger. Terrified, Rose exits the room as her mother begins to smile. Suddenly, her mother, who's now a tall, monstrous creature, the terrified woman moves away and waits for the creature to emerge from the shadows. Unexpectedly, the entity appears behind Rose and knocks her against the wall. Then the entity chokes her, claiming that she'll never escape her mind. Rose sights the fire lamp and breaks free from the chokehold, claiming it's her own mind to control. Afterward, she slams the fire lamp directly at the creature's head, setting it on fire. She walks away from the creature and stares at the burning house from outside before leaving. She then drives to Joel's place, apologizes to him, and asks if she can stay there for a while. Joel unhesitatingly accepts and vows that he'll stay with her forever. Rose notices his smile and immediately dashes out the door, only to discover she's still outside her old house, which didn't burn down. When she hears the real Joel calling her name, she rushes back inside the house and shuts the door. While Joel attempts to open the door, the entity rips off its face, revealing its true form and terrifying Rose. Shortly after, Rose suddenly freezes, and the entity forces itself inside her mouth. At last, Joel successfully opens the door, but he finds Rose pouring fuel on herself. The possessed Rose turns around wearing an evil, ominous smile and burns herself as the helpless Joel watches. If you have watched the video so far, you should know that I am happy to have viewers like you. Thank you for watching to the end. Subscribe to the channel and follow the news. Klontsak Recapped was with you. See you soon.